was really great what you did, Reese, with that young man. Yeah, so there's ways to do it. There's ways to do it. Receipts. Reese with the receipt.
I gotta go outside for
What are
quick.
they doing?
Hold on, babe.
What are those guys doing?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think we will get started very shortly. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to make sure that our Office of Risk Management and OCP colleagues are here.
Yes, we're here.
Great. So we can go ahead and dive in. Again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob Dorsey. I am the Chief of Staff here at the DC Department of Small and Local Business Development. And I want to thank everyone who was able to join today's session with the Office of Risk Management. As many of you know, this administration is committed to efficiency, transparency, and responsiveness. And one of the ways we do that is to make sure that, one, we're talking across agencies, which is why ORM, OCP, and DSLBD have been having conversations about these minimum insurance standards. And then the additional part of that is to make sure that we bring our local businesses into the conversation, which is why we're having this today with our CBEs in the professional services industry. So understanding that insurance is a major component in contracting and procurement, we wanted to provide an avenue for you and ORM to have a discussion. So part of this is going to be ORM discussing what our current minimum insurance standards are for contracts in the district. And also there'll be a portion where you all can ask questions, express concerns. But again, I just want to make sure that we are in a collaborative spirit today and taking in information. And of course, if there are any outstanding questions, we will definitely go back to the team and make sure we respond to those in a timely fashion. So again, lastly, on behalf of Director Rosemary Suggs-Evans, we would like to welcome you here today. And I will turn it over to either Jed or Robert. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob, for the introduction. Appreciate it. And want to thank you and DSLBD for hosting this and pulling this together. I think it's a very informative workshop. At least the first one has been, and I'm sure this one and the others will be as well. My name, again, is Robert Preston. I'm the Insurance Program Administrator for the Office of Risk Management. With us here today, we, in addition to DSLBD, we have our sister agency represented, the Office of Contracting Procurement. As Bob mentioned, this is an opportunity for us to engage with CBEs. The focus of this workshop is professional services. There are other ones that are scheduled for other specific types of contracts, but we will focus mostly on professional services, and we'll get into which ones those are. If you have additional ones, just feel free to put that in the chat or voice them throughout the presentation. Let me go ahead and get started then with the agenda for today. So we'll go a little bit over the goals and objectives for today's meeting. We'll talk a little bit about the background of how we got where we are today. Then we'll talk a bit about the minimum standard insurance for contracting in your industry. And then kind of what we're looking at as next steps, and then we'll leave some additional time for questions and discussions. If you do have a question or throughout the process, or have a suggestion or some sort of inquiry, feel free to raise your hand if you know how to do that. If not, we'll take then open-ended questions at the end where you can unmute yourselves. So as Bob kind of mentioned, the goal for discussion today is really to, well, ultimately the goal here is to support the CBEs to meet insurance requirements that are in the district government's contracts. How we're looking at doing that today is certainly one part of that is by understanding what your challenges are with meeting those insurance requirements. And then also eventually we'll also provide some additional education resources for you. And then we'll also work on promoting more transparency and consistency by publishing these minimum insurance standards for the various types of contracts. So for those of you who've been around for a while, I've been here in the insurance division for about 8 years, working on insurance requirements on contracts with the Office of Contracting Procurement and with those agencies that fall outside of contracting procurement, to really think through what are the challenges with our contracting community. Over the years, I've heard certainly several comments and contributions have been very helpful in working through those issues, and we're talking in the context of insurance. And so now we would like to kind of go the next step in really making the contracting easier by being more transparent about what those insurance requirements are based on industry. Would like to hear more about your obstacles, as I mentioned earlier, specifically in the context of insurance. And then I just also want to say that these standards are not new. So again, for those of you who've been around for a while and contracted with the district, you'll find that the insurance requirements are not new requirements. These are not things that should surprise you if you've contracted with us before. And then the last caveat here in the background consideration is that these are minimum requirements that are subject to change based on what it is that you'll be doing on behalf of the district. So bottom line, what's in the scope of the contract. So we're going to talk about consulting, we're going to talk about marketing, we're going to talk about staffing, and before I go into the specific like 3 types of services that we've picked out, that are kind of the majority of the contracts that the Office of Contracting Procurement sees in terms of professional services. I wanted to also mention that, you know, we look at these insurance standards on an annual, at the least on an annual basis, although we do have conversations with the district's insurance brokers on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis as well, to talk about, you know, what's currently in the insurance market, what are the challenges for businesses getting those insurance, and then, you know, taking all that in consideration as we work through the standard insurance in the contracts. What we, you know, ultimately what we do have to do is kind of look at making sure that whatever the risk associated with the scope is also translated into the insurance that we would require you as a business to have to protect you, to make sure that you continue being able to provide the service that you're contracted for, because as you know, claims can be very expensive, and we'll make sure that you don't have to dig into your coffers. Rather, you know, you can rely on insurance to do that. And then also to protect the taxpayer dollars in the event that there's a claim, that we can also recoup some of that money for those taxpayers. So talking in terms of consulting, it's pretty straightforward. I think, you know, our standard insurance requirements there are commercial general liability, auto liability if you use a car or vehicle in terms of the contract. Obviously, if you don't have a car, or it's not being used as part of the contract, or not being required for you to do that, and that entails, you know, going to a certain location, etc., then certainly you can request to have that looked at and possibly removed. Workers' compensation is also a requirement by law in the district. So if you have 1 or more employees, then you are required to carry workers' compensation. And so we just enforce that through our contracting. Employer's liability is related to workers' compensation. So those go hand in hand. Then there's what we call the excess or umbrella liability. So that goes over all those I just aforementioned. It allows us to make sure that there's enough money for you set aside should there be a claim in any of those directions, any of those types of insurance, if you will. We do require a crime coverage of $10,000, and then cyber liability coverage for $1 million, and then professional liability for the consulting recommendations that you provide as part of that contract. For those of you who are under working with marketing related contracts, it's very similar. As a matter of fact, I think it's exactly the same, except there's no crime coverage related to that. And the reason for that is that for professional services, there might be some funds and things that are related to that that are not necessarily related to the marketing piece. So it's just the type of scope, really, that's how it relates to that difference. And then the last one is staffing. So staffing is one of the ones that comes up the most. We do use a lot of temporary staffing agencies and other services from different vendors. And this is where we see the highest risk when we bring somebody on board to work either directly at our location, or whether we hire somebody to work remotely. And so generally this is looked at as a staffing organization rather than an individual. for individuals, there are some slight modifications that we do in terms of limits and types of insurance. I just wanted to put a caveat here that even though this chart says things like medical professional or professional sexual abuse molestation, all those are contingent on what's in the scope. So just because you're doing staffing related doesn't mean you have to necessarily carry all those. It just depends on if, for example, your staff is required to be at a vulnerable an area where there's vulnerable populations, then sexual abuse molestation would apply. If we're getting staff that require some sort of medical diagnosis and recommendations, then obviously medical professional would apply as well. Same thing with professional liability service. So if we're asking for some sort of consulting work, or we're relying on the person to provide some analysis on a project, for example, or for us to do the next steps, we would require professional liability. The standard ones are the ones above that. So employment practices, definitely for staffing agency, we would require that. Cyber would do require the umbrella and excess. Again, if we're talking staffing agency, we are requiring a higher limit. However, if if it's an individual or perhaps a smaller company, we could discuss a lower limit, but that's generally how we're looking at staffing related contracts. I just want to see, I know there's something posted in the chats, but so I'll start with that, but if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. This is your opportunity to give us your impressions, if you will, or challenges and resources that you would need to contract with the district government based on your past experience. And if you're having contract with us, what you would like to know in the future. So Nikki, you had your hand up first, so I'll go with you.
Hi, thank you. So I'm asking about a couple of things. Workers' compensation when it comes to certain contracts where we don't start the contract with employees. So what is, for example, if there's a contract where it just seems to be, it's a standard, one of the 6, 7, or 8 that are required, but if we are going to staff up according to that contract, what is the workaround for having to submit that insurance upfront?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Actually, you're not the first one to raise it. It does come up contracting a lot. The current process, and I'll let my colleague from OCP chime in if that's appropriate, is that the required insurance just needs to be in place prior to award. Workers' comp is something, if you have employees or tend to have employees, then that's what you should have in place.
Well, okay. So I'm sorry, I don't want you to jump to someone else. I have one more question at least.
Sure.
So when it comes to the automobile insurance, it seems like a lot of the opportunities require it, but there is no relevance to the use of the vehicle for the delivery of the work in any aspect. So for several professional services contracts, we're simply using our vehicle to drive to a meeting or to several meetings, or there are no participants or recipients of the services being in our vehicles, and we already have personal liability, but we don't have it under the business, and that can be a high expense for us when the business insurance for automobile coverage is significantly higher than personal coverage, and it seems like it shouldn't be required.
Yeah, so basically what that requirement says is that even though it says commercial auto, it just basically it's a requirement that if you're driving a vehicle that you have to have auto insurance. And so you can discuss with the contracting officers, at the time of whether you're using your personal auto insurance if there's an individual, or if the company has a commercial auto insurance. But regardless, like with the workers' comp, it's just required for if anybody drives a vehicle to have auto insurance.
Yeah, and then one last part of that is the named insured. So that's one thing to ask a commercial insurance provider to add a named insured versus a personal, to say, even though there's this one driver, they're asking who's the driver of the household, and that's different. But to have the requirement to add that named insured to the auto policy and change that language is not really possible for personal insurance, as far as I found.
Yeah, what we require is to have hired non-owned endorsement on there. So basically to say that you can also use the vehicle for commercial reasons. We definitely want you to have that confirmed with your insurance company, because if you are using it, to get to a place that's related to a contract, then we want to make sure that there's no declination in coverage once the insurance company finds out that you're using it for commercial reasons.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. The next person in line I have here is Matt.
Hello, can you hear
Sean?
me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, thank you. So I was in the process of CBE renewal as well as getting on the DC supply schedule. And I faced difficulty in getting on the DC supply schedule because I was required to take on a number of new insurance policies, although I didn't have that the first 5 years. Auto was one of them, and I don't even have a car. I can't remember the other ones, but essentially, as I'm hearing you, it sounds like there is room for that discussion to kind of, even though this is not about a specific contract, this is about intention to bid on it. And my question to you is this: it sounds like you guys, there's, some communication, some protocols and things like that to be figured out. But I want to cancel those insurance policies as soon as I can because they are quite expensive. But I don't want to do that and all of a sudden get into a situation where now I have to, I'm kicked out of the DC supply schedule and then have to work through this process again because it was very difficult and there wasn't a lot of engagement. I kept asking questions like, I don't think this is required. I've done the research. I've spoken to even people at the agencies, but this person would not budge. And so I had to go, and even the insurance brokers were like, I don't think you need it. I'm like, I have to have it. They will not talk to me after I have it. So now I have those, and I would like to cancel them as soon as possible. What is my path? What is the best way to handle this so that I stay compliant and stay within, but yet no longer have to carry the things that I don't need to carry?
Yeah, so Matt, that's a good question. We also have the same question for other types of contracts that are awarded in advance, but then there are no task orders issued till later in the game, but do not cancel them. Yeah, anyway, I see that Deputy Director Giles came on video, so I presume, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I've heard that concern this morning, and I immediately went to DC Supply Schedule folks during the break. And what we're going to do at the conclusion of this series of webinars that we're having, which will be done, I think, by Thursday, right, is the last one. We will go back and take a look at those particular issues and all the issues that have been brought up today that are directly related to our operations in Office of Contracting Procurement, and see what we are required to do statutorily and what we can look at and say, hey, this is a business practice which just does not make sense anymore. And as part of the process, I'm sure that Bob is going to have us do is go through and answer all those questions so that we'll be able to get back to this group. I would say expeditiously, but definitely looking at my calendar, I feel comfortable saying that before the end of the month, we will have responses as to what changes and practices we'll be able to make as a result of this interaction. So if that helps you with a time frame, hopefully you can live with that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Giles. That brings up I just want to reemphasize that again, that the goal of this meeting is not necessarily to solve all the issues, but certainly to understand what those issues are. And then, our job is to go back within our agencies, as Deputy Director Giles said, to see where we can ease those challenges, if not directly eliminate them. Matt, you still have your hand up. Did you have a follow-up question, or should we move on to the next one?
Nope, you can move on. I'll work on putting down my hand.
It's all good. All right. And I apologize in advance to mispronounce your name, perhaps. Chikesha Rashad?
Chikesha, how are you?
Chikesha. Great. Thank you. Sorry for mispronouncing that.
Oh, no worries. No worries. It comes with the name. I appreciate, first of all, the opportunity that you are providing us to hear about some of the updates and changes that are going along. I have been contracting with DC since 2016. I've been a CBE as well. And I have just a point to make to some of a couple of things that some of the people had to say about the vehicle, about having to get separate auto insurance. My experience is when you're calling for your commercial liability, there is a clause that can be added in if you don't own a car, that they for business, that it's called non-owned and hired vehicles. And it's a clause they can just put into that policy that will meet the standard. So you don't have to have a separate automobile policy if you don't have a commercial vehicle. So I just wanted to bring that up. That's been my experience. That's what I've done. Even most recently as this year, when I did my CBE renewal, I was able to do that. The other thing that I had experienced, I have several contracts with one particular agency, and one of the things that I saw on there that I had not seen in the past was the crime insurance. And calling around to get it, some people asked, could I get a fidelity or surety bond, if that would meet the standard for the companies that didn't offer quote unquote crime insurance. And then the other point that I have in the past, I've had contracts with OSCE, and most recently in the last couple of years, they've added the sexual molestation coverage on there, which is understandable, but it is also very expensive if you're not a business that traditionally deals with underage youth. I had to personally turn down doing some things under the Marenbury Summer Youth program because the insurance was so expensive. So I'm wondering if for projects that are short term, where you may be dealing with an underage population, are there some caveats in that coverage request? Like, I know you have to have it, but are there some not say limit caveats, but are there some other options that can be done in terms of another type of bond?
So if we're talking about crime, I mean, a lot of times, and you should talk with your broker about this, crime is just added on to one of your policies. It's kind of a giveaway that many carriers have, especially at a low level as 10,000. Bond is more a completion rather than a third-party crime coverage. So that it just depends on what the scope of the work is. Generally, it's more towards construction rather than professional services. Again, I would encourage you to talk with your broker about that. In terms of sexual abuse molestation,
I've actually sent them the entire drafts of solicitations, and that's what they've, because I had to price this year for the ones that I have 4 contracts right now, and I had to price insurance for each one and make adjustments. And so when it came to the crime part, and I believe the level that I was asked for was more than 10,000. So maybe that's a thing. But they were asking surety bond or fidelity bond meet the crime requirement. I was able to eventually find a company that could do it, but it took well over a week of calling multiple brokers to get it.
Okay, well, I mean, your broker, if you have a good commercial broker, that broker should be making those calls for you and getting you quotes to compare. And that's one of the resources, and I'll talk about that a little bit on the next steps that we've kind of thinking about and based on comments that we've received in the past, that has to do with the type of scenario you just said, but also in terms of pricing. But I did want to kind of wrap up your questions in terms of sexual abuse molestation, and there it's required to have. There's unfortunately not really a go around that, and we use in the application process, if you will, that you have to go through for insurance companies to also kind of vet organizations to make sure that they have the right protocols in place and right procedures in place when they are dealing with certain risks, whether it's with cyber, whether it's with sexual abuse molestation, because we don't really get into running the operations of your business, but we do kind of indirectly rely on this application process and the pricing ultimately that you get from the insurance company to kind of vet the organizations. So we look at insurance many different ways, like I mentioned before. One, to make sure to support you financially as an organization, to make sure that you stay in business when you have a claim. Two, to make sure that we're good stewards of taxpayer dollars should we have a claim. And then third, also to help vet organizations through the insurance application process to make sure that the right standards and protocols in place. Those are generally 12-month policies, and they are difficult to get and they are very expensive. We do hear that and we do look at that. Currently, we don't have an alternative solution, but I've noted your question, and certainly you're not the first to bring that up, especially when we work with the summer youth program or other organizations that just deal with the population in a very short, vulnerable population for a short term period. There's a question here. Prime. I'm saying crime. Crime is the question. The question in the chat. So for the subcontractors, that also comes up. The requirements, the way they say now, is that basically the primary contractor, so wherever the district contracts with, has to have the insurance in place, as well as its subcontractors. We do kind of leave it up to the general contractor to work with its subs on how they want to mitigate that insurance requirement, but generally we don't get into that because we don't like to get into managing your company's business, whether you're the prime or whether you are the sub. Yes, there's the recording of this session will be available, is my understanding, from the DSLBD's YouTube channel. And yeah, we've went ahead and noted all the other questions that are in here, and we'll take those into consideration. Are there any other particular resources that you'd like to see, or particular challenges that you encounter when trying to get insurance for contracting with the district? Yes, Sharon.
I just wanted to raise the issue again around the umbrella coverage. So it's very difficult for cyber and for the molestation policy to get the umbrella coverage on top of, like to have the umbrella on top of the coverage for those two areas. That's also have been a challenge that I just want to raise. I haven't had to do it for 10 million, but to get it for the 5 million is very costly and very much a challenge.
Yeah, so currently the insurance companies don't cover cyber under umbrella. You have to get what's called an excess policy over the cyber. We do work, we do look at how your insurance program is structured. So if the requirement is, I don't think for any of these the base of the cyber is more than $1 million, but if there is, then generally what we do is we would require the you could do it either way. Like you could increase the limit of the cyber basis or increase the excess policy. But for any of these, all the requirements are $1 million cyber. So and we understand that the umbrella does not go over that. So the umbrella would be for all the other lines of coverage that it does cover. And then Sharon, your other point was
The molestation. And actually I need it for a different area. I have staffing too, although I haven't gotten a contract with staffing, and I also do healthcare staffing. But just in general, getting the umbrella on top of the the molestation is also a challenge, and super expensive if they do it.
Yeah, and the insurance companies are making it difficult because they've seen a lot of losses on that front. So again, having a good broker to help maneuver you through that process would be very helpful. Also, if there are questions about how an insurance program can be structured, I would encourage you that during the solicitation period to have you and your broker come up with those questions so they can be answered during that solicitation period. Because again, insurance can be structured in many different ways, and sometimes also the way we're looking at things may not be the way that you may be looking at it. So we can have that discussion during the solicitation period. But once that solicitation period is closed, it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to then change any of that. But I've noted you're that concerned about the sexual abuse molestation, and it's certainly something that it's tough right now in the insurance market. Is it Janelle Anderson? And then we'll go back to Nikki. Hello? Is it Janelle Anderson? You're mute if you're trying to talk.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
There you are. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Is it possible for the government to divide insurance requirements to jobs that are under 1 million and maybe over 1 million? And the reason I'm saying that is because most of my jobs, the construction cost is under 1 million. And so as an architect, my fee is not that much with the government. And to have to pay a $5 million umbrella insurance, that probably covers the cost of my fee. So I would like you to consider it. I really thank God that you guys eliminated for us that $10 million umbrella. I do have a $5 million umbrella, and I have to go through Lloyd's of London, which is relatively expensive. But it's a consideration because it seems as if the insurance covers whether you have a construction project that is 500 or is 500 million. So if you could please consider that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. There's only one category currently where we do correlate the contract value with the limits. insurance limits, and that's for IT contracts. But that will change also in the next couple of years as we review a different assessment. When we look at insurance requirements based on the scope, we take into consideration the risks that are involved, and then talk with our brokers about what it would cost should there be a claim for that. So that's the consideration that goes into setting those limits. Because again, we want to make sure that should there be a claim that that your organization is financially viable. But it's definitely something that comes up and something we revisit often. And take in consideration when we look at those standards. So thank you for bringing that point up. Nikki.
Sure, and thank you again. Since OCP is on the call, I was just wondering if not as heavy as the questions about the actual insurance, but inside of several solicitations, it's often confusing where when we write, especially to OCP, since there are so many employees there and so many contracting specialists, it can get confusing. And maybe the solicitation document will have an address for OCP, and then who to make the named insured to, whether it's Office of Contracting Procurement in DC government or just one or the other, and which address to put in. So this might be maybe it's unique to me, maybe others on the call have the same confusion, but sometimes it can be very confusing, and then it's not always as clear, or there might be more than one reference inside of the solicitation documents as to the insurance requirements, and then who to write them to. So whatever all of that information, however it comes through to OCP, if you could just consider that as well, just to make streamline clarity. Maybe here is the one page that outlines exactly to whom, whose name, whose attention, or whatever that insurance information needs to be written to. When we call for a court certificate to have it, it is sometimes kind of hard to hash out and clarify to the insurance company. Thanks.
Excuse me, are you referring to the certificate of insurance that you sent out with your sponsored solicitation?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we will, as you said, we will provide you the clarity whenever we do a follow-up on this. But let me tell you right now, that certificate of insurance should never be made out to an individual in the district. Should always name the District of Columbia as the insurer.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I probably just threw that in the mix, but sometimes it will have whether it's OCP and it has to be written on there specifically as well, and the district, or just the district. I just responded to one that said Office of Contracting and Procurement, and then it had an address which is different from the OCP address another solicitation had. It just gets confusing, because you wonder, you can't really ask those questions when you're submitting that maybe the day or two before that part is due, or the solicitation is due, because the window has closed. And so you're just kind of crossing your fingers, hoping the right name and address, is on there.
I don't know what the address sometimes it may be, but it's always the District of Columbia government.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
Sure, Nikki. That's a great question. So definitely, if you have that section I-8 is generally where the insurance requirements are, and there's a subsection there that kind of should say that the government of the District of Columbia should be the named insured, and then with a care of to whatever agency you're working with. And if it's OCP, then the OCP folks and an address there. But as Deputy Director Giles said, we'll take another look at that, make sure that it's clear in the solicitations. What's
a 907?
Excuse me? Oh, that's somebody else. Yeah, we have we've scheduled this till 3. I don't want to hold everybody up, but if there are any other questions or ideas on how to help with the insurance piece, for contracting, now is a good time. Yeah, Matt.
So in kind of asking some questions during the process, I was sent I guess it looks like like a guideline or one sheet, but it's dated 2019. And so, it's a little bit outdated. And then B, even when I read that, it's still, confirmed what I was thinking compared to what the other individual was basically stating that this is required. And so, I don't want to go back and forth in the person that I'm trying to work with. So I think an updated, someone else mentioned this before, but it seems like some updated materials, a centralized location with some updated materials would be helpful, especially since, then we'll get more higher level questions than simple ones, which can be covered by a simple one sheet. So, I'm happy to volunteer for that, to help you with that, because that's what I do, digital marketing. Like it's so hard to find the latest guidance.
Yeah.
So that's definitely missing, sorely missing, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. And we've actually noted that, and let me just finish the presentation and maybe, so one of the things is certainly to publish these, these requirements based on, or these standards based on the different types of scope. We'll do that. We also, our intention is to provide, additional continual education about insurance, both from the perspective of contracting with the district, but our sister agency, whom we're also working with in this project, Insurance, Securities, and Banking. Well, their intention is also to provide some additional resources and training on insurance in general. So for general business operations in the district, so regardless of whether you're working or contracting with the district government or not, and those additional resources. So one of the things that we have kind of talked about, we're not committing to this at this point, but certainly something that makes sense, is to have one place to have questions about insurance when contracting with the district, and then with some additional resources. So that's certainly one thing that we would like to see done. We just have to iron out some of the feasibility and logistics of it, because we do recognize that there are a lot of questions about insurance and contracting, and it would be helpful to go to one place to get those answers. We're working on some additional resources, whether it's helping with finding commercial brokers, whether it's with the types of insurance that's out there, et cetera, and what you can do as an organization to put your best foot forward, if you will, when applying for insurance, so that to help with those, reducing those insurance premiums. And then we do have kind of a general contact information here. So again, if you're working for a specific solicitation, please contact the contracting officer that's listed in a solicitation. There's a place that the Office of Contracting Procurement has for general contracting questions called the Procurement Center of Excellence, the Customer Contact Center there, information. If you have general contracting insurance questions, happy to answer them here at the Office of Risk Management. Just note that those are just general contracting questions, not necessarily for anything specific. If you are calling about a specific solicitation, we will encourage you to go back to the contracting officer and set up a call. All this, post solicitation is going to be really tough to talk about any specific solicitation, but while the solicitation is still open, that's your time to follow the proper protocols and channels to ask those questions. And finally, on the page there, you'll see some general insurance questions. I mentioned the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. They're also available to help businesses in the district to talk about insurance and what it is that what some of their challenges are and what the resources they have. On the one agency I did mention is the Department of Consumer Licensing, Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, DLCP. They handle the licensing in the district. So we're here talking about contracting. However, sometimes we do get questions about, well, the licensing, the insurance requirements for licensing is different than contracting. Yes, that's the case. Because just because you do business in the district, it's not the same as actually doing business with the DC government. So that there's that distinction there. And if there aren't, let me just see here. We're gonna again record all these questions and comments and suggestions as we continue kind of looking at insurance and contracting, and either get back to you directly or incorporate them into our efforts here. Christina, you had asked about the insurance requirements reflecting the contract totals, and I think that was similar to it was Janelle's question. And currently the only types of contract we do that for is information technology. Otherwise, they're based on the risks that are associated with the scope. And I think those are the only. And clarification for subcontractors, yes, we have noted that, and we're going to be working also internally about that process for subcontractors. Ultimately, it's really going to be up to the primary contractor to decide how to handle their subcontractors. All right. If there are no other questions or comments, the chat will be open for a little bit, is my understanding. So feel free to, if anything pops in your head, to put it in there. If not, you have DSLBD's contact information. Also, based on this contact slide here, based on your question.
I have a question.
Oh, yes. Who's this?
This is Chikasha again.
Oh, yeah.
So I do see that there has been a partial update to the OCP site with the solicitations, but when you click on some of the hyperlinks for the doc numbers, it still takes you to that old system of where the solicitations are listed, and they have a lot of old ones still on there as open. Is that still being worked on to be updated?
So I don't know if Director Giles wants to get it, or if we just table this.
Are you talking about the portal?
Yeah.
Are you talking about contracts that have been published? Is that what you're referring to?
So on my daily check, I go to OCP's website, then I click
Yeah.
solicitations, and it takes you
Okay.
to the new part. But
Okay.
when you scroll through and let's say you find one that you want to bid on, often there is a doc number listed there that's hyperlinked. So when you
Okay.
click on that doc number, it takes you to the old version of the solicitations, and there's some still on there from like 2016 that are still in the open part.
Right.
There's like the closed, open, and pending are the
Okay.
three areas, but there's a lot of old listed in the open section, and there's some that say no. There's a lot also that say no limit. But when
Yeah.
you click on it, it's all old, things that are years old.
Okay. So this is a question that's strictly about the website in terms of the solicitation availability and updating that status. Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll have to take a look at that and see what we got. Maybe we need to clean up our portal to make sure that it's current and we've gotten rid of the old stuff. That's my only immediate response to that. That's kind of separate from this conversation, but yeah, we will note that and see what we got to do to update the link.
And my last question, I know that based on our codes for our businesses, that oftentimes we will get an invitation to bid on items. but oftentimes I'm writing in for an invitation to bid on certain solicitations. Is that process going to be updated, or will it continue to be like pulled for people who have codes? That I'm assuming that when I get an automatic invitations because the search was done for the codes on the automatic ones I get, but the ones that uh, uh, I actually have a whole template email that I have to write in for the ones that I don't get invitations to.
Well, the Ariba Pass system will generate invitations directly by NIGB code to certain vendors who match the code with the scope of services that's being solicited. And then, as you said, in the process where you see something that you have not been invited to, you can still request invitation to that by going directly through the contact number in the solicitation. I don't see any change in that particular process right now. It is statutorily meeting the requirements of the government, so that process I'm pretty sure will stay in place.
The only concern I've had with that is there's been a time or two, or a few, where the contracting officer has been out of office, and it might be a solicitation that's only open for about 3 days or so, and then you're trying to call around and find out who is working in their stead to get the invitation if they're out of office.
Right. And the procurement center of excellence, the contact number is the primary number that you can have to get around that particular problem and get the immediate attention. It will be brought to the attention of someone in that particular area, no matter who the contract and also what their status is, so that you can get help getting invited to that particular solicitation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Deputy Director. And again, the focus of this particular workshop is really about the insurance section. I know that OCP has continual town halls and workshops and gatherings for CBEs to address specifically contracting things. So I just wanted to, for the last time here before we close out the meeting, ask for any insurance related questions or ideas on resources that we should consider. Great. Hearing none, again, the opportunity is for you to put it in the chat for the future, and also, you have our contact information there on the slide, and we'll keep DSLBD and the community updated as things roll out. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thanks, Robert. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.